Diving right back into some of the top prospects here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Today we'll look at Iowa forward Keegan Murray, a guy who looks pretty good and some like and some don't, but is still tabbed as one of the top prospects. We'll break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News. And today, I keep saying I cover the Indiana Pacers, but then don't talk about the Pacers at all and cover draft prospects. And today, we're right back on that train, going with Keegan Murray, the forward from Iowa, who is a very tough nut to crack for me. I've had less trouble with every other prospect in this draft class because it's easier for me to make a profile. And I'm a numbers nerd, and Keegan Murray's advanced stats are awesome. Primo, awesome prospect alert if you start there. And you look at the tape, and it's not quite as awesome as the advanced stats suggest. So helping me cut through this from Box and One, Adam Spinella, who I've talked to about the draft for years and years and years. We're talking Keegan Murray today. Is he as confusing to you as he is to me? Is that a stupid reason to be confused about a prospect? What do you think about Keegan Murray?
Well, Tony, first off, thanks for having me on here. I always enjoy getting to talk some Pacers. Some of the best coverage around the NBA gets done around this franchise, and you're a huge part of that. So always appreciate the work that you do. As a guy who used to live in Indiana, obviously means a little bit more to me as well. But I am actually a big Keegan Murray guy in the right context. I'm with you. The analytics and the numbers that he has produced from a per minute standpoint really when you produce at the level that he has, it's hard to envision failure in the NBA in any regard. So I think he's one of those really high floor prospects, and that makes me feel pretty comfortable in taking him in a class that really lacks a ton of star power outside of the top 4 or 5, in projecting that Keegan is going to be a safe but worthwhile bet to make somewhere in the later parts of the top 10.
Yeah, I cut through the advanced numbers, like first cut with a lot of prospects. Like before I watch your tape, what am I looking for? What are the backgrounds of your strengths and weaknesses? And I jumped to Keegan Murray's basketball reference page, and I see 30% usage and 5.7% turnover rate. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy just like never gives up the ball. Great block and steal percentage, which are usually good indicators of like he can read the game and be in the right spots on defense. Decent rebound rate, basically everything but assists. Like shoots enough threes, gets the line, looks great. And then you watch the tape and it's not quite there. So we'll run through some strengths and weaknesses here in order. We'll start with strengths. And to me, the thing about Keegan Murray that is the biggest strength isn't one thing. It's that he can kind of do everything. He's not going to like ISO guys all the time, but he's a good cutter. He can post up a little bit. Like he catches with his back to the basket a lot, but also catches facing up, at the 3-point line. He's a good shooter. Can finish at the rim really well, despite being a little bit contact averse. On defense, reads the game pretty well, despite not always being the best like at defending post-ups, but is still a really good defender. Like he can kind of just do everything, and that was what was really alluring to me when I was watching his tape.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment there. And, for Murray, if there's one thing that he can hang his hat on as a skill, it's being really physical without playing out of control. And I think that that's a really hard thing for a prospect to be able to do, is to initiate contact, to handle contact well, but not be incredibly charge prone, to not be sped up by any means. And I think there's a lot of the confusing part about Keegan Murray's offense is how is he going to translate to more of a perimeter role than he played at Iowa. He got to play out of the post a ton because in college, post-ups are a little bit more frequent, and he had a size advantage a lot of the time playing on the block as a 4 in Iowa's system. I don't know if he's going to have that same ability or opportunity in the NBA. And when you talk about translation to a little bit more perimeter handling and offensive face-up game, you want to see guys that have a little bit more quick twitch athleticism, a little tighter handle of the ball in a lot of ways. But he has some go-to moves. He has the ability to play under control, and he thrives through contact. In those areas, I think I'm not a big player comparison guy, but just with how reliant he is on spin moves, how kind of long he can be without being out of control, there's a little bit of like a Pascal Siakam-like feel to how he might best be deployed at the NBA level.
Why are there so many spin move prospects this year? Paolo, Jaded, Keegan, they're all spin move dudes. They cannot help it. They love their spin moves.
Yeah, I think it comes from a point where guys who don't have as quick of a first step to get around guys need to develop counters to be able to get to their spots and change direction. You're driving one way in the middle of the floor, your defender comes and cuts you off. If you can't get all the way around him or just have one quick crossover and go, you need something that's a little bit more controlled. It tends to be like turning your back to an opponent. If he's hounding you in the full court, you tend to back him down a little bit more, circa Mark Jackson, right? I think spin moves are a natural progression of that. So all of these guys, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're physical, and they're decent handlers, but they just don't have that top end speed or quickness to be able to separate, especially from smaller guys who a lot of college teams would put on him to try to undercut his dribble.
One of Keegan's strengths that I'll be interested in the NBA projection for is kind of, you talked about the post ups at Iowa. Like, he's a really good off ball mover, and he's like good at getting himself open when he doesn't have the ball or he's away from the play. Something he does a lot, or at least in the games I watched, is he would cut kind of towards the basket and then just kind of turn around and kind of post up, face the ball off of his cut, which worked a lot. He had a size advantage and he can finish over guys, like really good when he turned baseline. You talked about finishing through contact, good finisher in general. That was always really good. That does not happen in the NBA as much, where you turn your cut into a post up. So I do think he's really refined in kind of that mid post area, both as a putting it on the floor guy, face up and shoot kind of guy. He can operate well in that area and get himself open with an advantage, especially if he's switched onto. Like, he'll be really hard to switch onto if he grows well into the NBA. But that's not something that is seen very much, and I'll be curious how the team that ends up drafting him kind of toggles him between the player that the NBA suggests he could be and the skills he showed as an Iowa Hawkeye.
Well, he's versatile in a lot of positive ways, and I think that versatility comes to, if you put him with an imaginative coach with a deep playbook like a Rick Carlisle, there's so many different ways that you can utilize him. He can play isolation ball in the low post against a smaller guy, or at the top of the key or the elbows against a bigger guy. I know a lot of NBA teams in out of timeout situations will play through a lot of those mismatch post ups for guys that aren't their big men, right? Like, I know the Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, a lot of times they'll find a weak link in the defense who's guarding one of those three and just walk that guy from a corner into the lane and try to post him up. It's a similar type of concept, although it's more designed and less free flowing. I think the free flowing nature just speaks to his general feel and IQ for the game and understanding, hey, I've got a guy on me. I'm just going to go to the spot that allows me to abuse that mismatch to my advantage. And, again, it may not work in that exact way in the NBA, but the awareness is something that's really attractive.
I'm going to hammer you in the tweet for this show with comparisons to Pascal Siakam and Jason Tatum, and just make this the worst tweeted out podcast.
Yeah, let's not do that, Tony.
I'm not a big comps guy. I would never do that to you. Yeah, on defense, his defense is really interesting. Is a dumb word. I use that a lot for stuff that kind of confuses me. Like, he reads the game pretty well. His advanced stats are there, that like he's getting in the way of steals. He's a good blocks guy. So something you've talked about that I didn't notice much was, he does finish well through contact and plays well through contact, but he also kind of avoids it. To me, at least, I put that he was kind of contact averse, or thought he was. And so on defense, like when he's more out on the perimeter, like he's on guys, his length is strong. He moves his feet really well. When he's in the post, which he ended up a lot at I almost just said IU, at Iowa, kind of being more around the basket defensively, he could kind of get bullied off of with strength. But he's not like skinny or anything. So that is somewhere where I thought his contact aversion kind of hurt him. But in general on defense, I thought his foot speed, his length, his ability to read the game really shined, and he was good on that end of the floor.
I think this is a conversation that we could have about a bunch of prospects, both in this cycle and in recent memory. What's the difference between being a tweener, kind of caught between two different positions where you don't have one naturally, and being multi-positional? I think the difference is just how effective you are, right? And with Keegan, I think that the skepticism about how he's going to be on that end is trying to understand, okay, what position does he really guard? I think the 4 spot in the NBA is one that's constantly evolving and always dictates the way that the game is played for your team. So, for example, the Indiana Pacers, when they would play Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis together, that really changed the way that they had to do everything offensively, defensively, how they spaced the floor, what actions they ran, how they guarded other opponents' best players. Another team like Miami right now, who has PJ Tucker playing the 4, space him in the corner, stretch the floor on offense, and then you can be more switchable, more versatile on the defensive end. Keegan, I don't think he blends into one specific category, right? Like, I don't think that he's necessarily a guy that can guard threes at a consistent full-time level. He might be able to do it on some possessions. There's a little bit of switchability and perimeter defense there, but I don't see him as a guy that, hey, let's just go super big and slide Keegan to the 3. He'll be fine. To me, that's not his ideal role. But he's also not a polished enough rim protector, strong enough body on the interior to be that small ball 5, which a lot of teams tend to go to in crunch time. So again, whether he gains some of these skills, gets a little bit quicker, maybe we're, underrating the value in that, bulks up a little bit more, or at least figures out how to be a paint protector on the defensive end, that can open that multi-positional door for him. But right now, I see him pretty heavily slotted in as more of a 4 defender in the NBA. And anybody who follows my work understands that I go off of positions based on who you guard, not necessarily.
I have adopted that from you.
No, it's not about your offensive skill set anymore, because there is no such thing as a point guard, right? Giannis runs the point for Milwaukee. Nikola Jokic does it for Denver. So really, your position is who you guard. And as a team building philosophy guy, try to look for how you combine different skill sets together to develop a positive offense.
This is a weird take I'm about to have about this draft, but I'm almost more worried about Keegan Murray getting muscle in the NBA than Chet. And Chet's the guy that gets all the attention about being really skinny, because if Keegan doesn't get I don't think he needs to be way strong or anything, but then he's kind of forced to defend 4s. If he can't do 5s and switch well with 3s, it's like you've got to be good on the position you're at. So if he doesn't get some strength, it's kind of limiting the versatility aspect of that strength of his defensive game.
Sure. I don't know if I think that Keegan is really that far off in terms of his strength. Again, maybe it's something about how to use it. But at the end of the day, if you're going into a small ball type of game and you're going to play a guy like Keegan Murray, who's about 6'8", 6'9", decently long arms, you're going to play him at the 5, then you're okay with the other team coming in and trying to pound the ball inside, right? Like, this is more about trading 3s for 2s, spacing the floor and attacking mismatches, believing, all right, whatever it is that he gives up on the interior at that end, we're going to be able to get back as a team on the other. And more so than anything, it's going to come down to whether Keegan is willing to box those guys out and be a physical rebounder, which I think he will.
The last thing that is noteworthy as a big strength to me, I mentioned at the beginning, the turnovers, or the lack of turnovers, I suppose, because he's used in so many ways. Face up from far away, turn your back and kind of post up, move your defender around, manipulate the defense. He's not a high volume passer at all, which definitely helps his turnover rate. But he has a really clean handle when he ISOs. He's got a clean handle around the basket. He makes good decisions when he does pass, even though it's not necessarily leading to assists. To have the ball as often as Iowa gave him the ball and very rarely turn it over was so impressive to me.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And again, I think his role is going to be greatly diminished in an NBA setting as opposed to what it was at Iowa. He's not a primary creator by any means. I don't even know if he's a really high-level secondary creator. It's almost like the role that Drew Holiday has right now for the Milwaukee Bucks, whereas if he's your third option, he can do so many different things that's valuable. But as soon as he gets bumped up to your second option, you're a little bit offensively starved. That's where I think Murray thrives, is being a really good third option, 15 to 17 points a game, very efficient in what he does, scores a little bit everywhere, and he's going to score on plays you don't necessarily have to run for him. Because what I like a lot about Keegan Murray, and this is an underrated skill, he's really good in that rebound and run department in transition. When he is active defensively, he gets out and plays in the open floor, but he can also rebound himself and push the break. And I think the guys who can do that effectively, you don't have to worry as much about their half-court role, because they're going to find ways to be productive as long as they hit the glass.
Hey guys, short little break so I can tell you about Built Bar, who is making the best tasting protein bars ever. They're 100% covered in chocolate, delicious protein bars that have something for everybody. They've got a flavor No matter what your favorite palette is, they've got some sweeter flavors. They've got some puff flavors with marshmallow in them. They've got some fruitier flavors. There's something for everybody. You can get a mixed package. You can get a package with just your favorite flavor. So what makes them so good? Well, they're 100% covered in real chocolates. They basically taste like a candy bar, and they're super healthy. They're great for the health-conscious guy. They're a good snack, a good meal replacement. Their new highlighted flavor is the brownie batter puffs. They're absolutely delicious. If you love brownies, you'll absolutely love it. It's got 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, only 7 grams of sugar. Absolutely delicious. You've got to try it at Built.com. If you use the promo code LOCKS15, when you check out, you'll get 15% off your order of whatever flavor you get, the mixed package, the brownie batter puffs, your favorite, whatever. Use promo code LOCKS15 for 15% off at Built.com. Yeah, that rebounded run will really click with Carlisle and Halliburton, really. Those guys love to get out and go if he is drafted by the Pacers. I'd like to thank everyone for making Locked On Pacers their first listen today and every single day. I want to flip to some weaknesses, Adam. And I just mentioned this is a positive, but we got to go to the flip side of the low turnovers. I haven't really sat down and thought about the comparison, but I would say of the top 8 or so guys in this class, probably the worst passer. Just doesn't really look to throw guys open, and he can make the basic read or know he knows where, if he's in trouble, he knows where his teammate is to get him out of trouble or reset the play, which is good, but very rarely creating for others in a meaningful way. Every assist he gets is he's doubled in the post and he finds a shooter kind of near him on the court.
Yeah, and look, he's not going to be a primary creator, like we said. He's not a body type or an athlete who is really going to be used out of the pick and roll. So I don't see him having a pick and roll handling type of upside. But I don't think he's a horrible passer. I think that a lot of those numbers are, a byproduct of the role that he was in, which is they need him to go out and score. And he was just that much better than other guys that he played against in college. So I try not to hold that against him too much, but I agree with the assessment. He's on the lower end of kind of top 10 guys in terms of passing ability.
What did you think of his pick and roll defense? I thought he was mostly okay at that situation, but yeah, your face is kind of how I felt about it too. Understood what he needed to do or understood what the coaching staff was saying, okay, stand here, try to corral this guy or drop to this guy, but nothing right home about worthy stuff.
Well, Iowa is just a mess on that end of the floor each of the last 2 years.
Fran's team.
Nah, no way, right? Yeah. It's hard to know what to pin on him in a lot of this coverage. We mentioned he's not a rim protector. So when other teammates of his are guarding the pick and roll, he's not going to be the saving grace from the back line. But when he's guarding the pick and roll, he also didn't have that saving grace behind him. I think that he looks a lot different in an NBA where he plays with a rim protector. And that extra blanket of security is going to allow him to use his length, to try to use his quickness a little bit and pressure some different guys. Now, again, the position that he guards, probably not going to be asked to defend a ton of ball screens. And defensively, this is where the valuation question really starts to come in. He's a solid defender, but I would not put him against a perimeter-oriented wing/forward type who can really handle and create. I don't think he does well against a Kawhi Leonard, a Paul George, Jason Tatum, any of those guys who are really, really ball screen centric and can create in those mid-range areas. I don't think that's the right area for him to defend. So for what you ask him to do, I think he's going to be solid, but we just have to make sure that our expectations aren't that he's coming in and being a lockdown guy. Solid enough team defender, going to be a plus when he guards non-lethal threats, but you're probably not putting him on Tatum most times in a 7-game series in the playoffs.
This will be a sort of long-winded thought about, projecting guys in the NBA, but defending pick and rolls is something I try to look at for every single prospect. And even if you aren't, let's say you're not shutting down Tatum or whatever, no one does, but let's say you're not even guarding them that much. But I think we're seeing more in the NBA now, especially in the playoffs. And it's not fair to evaluate a prospect in a championship setting. You know what I mean? They're not in the NBA yet. That's not fair. But as these teams get better outside of the Mavs, a lot of the really good teams right now, have multiple ways to beat you on a given possession. And sometimes that is a lot of guys can handle in the pick and roll. So as the scale of your opponent gets better, you almost have to be able to defend pick and rolls or you will get picked on. The Lakers did their absolute best this a whole season to Melo is going to guard the guy we think is least likely to be in a pick and roll, right? And that's good, but also very challenging to do, in high pressure situations or when the other team has a lot of creators. So like, I always am very curious about prospects pick and roll defense because there will be games where they have to, like, all the time, or like a team will be trying, if they're the worst guy, and maybe he's not the worst guy in a lineup, but like there will be situations where he has to do that, and it's not always easy. So I'm always very curious about how prospects fit in pick and roll defense.
That's a super fair point there, Tony. As I try to play devil's advocate and give you the counterpoint back, as I've been doing this draft stuff for a few more years here, what I've really found is that how guys defend in a college setting doesn't always equate to what they'll be in the NBA. And the biggest reason for that is the stakes are a little bit different. And the NBA probably does a lot better of a job of teaching effective NBA defense than what a lot of colleges might be able to do. So, when the game is on the line, you're trying to evaluate athletic tools. He's long, he's decently quick. I think that if his motor catches up to that in terms of, how low he's willing to play, like the buzzword right now on NBA draft Twitter is bend. Are guys able to bend around screens in different situations, have that body fluidity to just not be very stiff and robotic? He's not great in that regard, but I think that he has the length, the quickness, and if the motor comes with that in the right situation, that he'll be okay. And again, not great, not a lockdown guy, but he can be okay surviving against secondary guys in that situation.
I think I saw a good thread or a couple tweets from Jake Rosen about bend that was really interesting, and maybe I had never even thought about that before. It is really fascinating. So another thing I want to talk about here with Keegan, and I'm going to go back to something you said earlier. Mark Jackson. You said the name Mark Jackson. Keegan Murray has a lot of, like, his ISOs aren't bad, but he's not like he doesn't cook guys off the dribble like ever, really, not very often. So a lot of what he does to create a shot or create a space is a longer back down, which is fine if you can score and do it. That is also a lot harder in the NBA. So I don't know if I can call this a weakness, but like not his main source of creation, but a very often used one, will be very much neutered against better, stronger defenders. Like, does that at all worry you at all that he can't really beat guys off the dribble that often?
A little bit. I think I mentioned that in the prospect video that we did on him over at the Box and One, which is he has a very long first step, but not a very quick one. And that length only helps him separate from guys when he has a believable shot fake. So a lot of this comes back to, is he going to be a really high value catch and shoot guy? Whether that's off the pick and pop, whether that's spotting up, remains to be seen. But if he can knock down shots credibly and guys close out tight to him, that long first step can make up for a lot of that stuff. When it comes to the back downs, the isolations, I just don't see that as being a huge part of his game in the NBA. And if it is, I think he's horribly miscast there, or he's gotten a hell of a lot better from where he is right now in terms of those quickness attributes, just his ability to read and dictate to guys, or he's much more physical of a player and getting to the free throw line at a higher rate. So again, a lot that I like about Keegan Murray, but as a complementary piece, none of that worries me. As soon as he has to slide into that alpha role, I don't really know if that's necessarily there.
We have barely talked about a shot, which you just mentioned. We are 22 and a half minutes into a podcast right now. We haven't talked about a three-point shot. That is a record in the year 2022. That is usually very high up, and it's not a weakness, so I can't really include it in this segment. Like, he improved his three-pointer so much from year 1 to 2 at Iowa. That was part of his ascent in general. It's like, now he has to be guarded differently. He's got the counters. He's always had good enough free throw percentage to make you think he can be a good shooter. Like, I think he'll be a fine shooter in the NBA. Maybe not amazing or anything, but I think he'll be a pretty good shooter in the NBA. And the Pacers already have Chris Duarte, who I think is going to be a really, really, really damn good shooter in the NBA based on his first year. So I just wanted to talk about his shooting for 2 seconds because we haven't brought it up yet. But it's not a weakness despite where I'm placing it in this show.
I think he's pretty good as a shooter. Smooth, replicable mechanics, which I always look for, the consistency of the shot every single time he takes it. Good off the pick and pop. And with his size, that's probably a role he'll play a decent amount. Solid spotting up in the corners. And again, he can attack closeouts, which is a nice 2-for-1. When you're looking at a spot up shooter, you don't want to just know, can they knock down those shots? It's if they get chased off the line because they're good in that role, are they going to make the right decision or be able to attack the paint? And then beyond that, there's like this sneaky amount of movement upside to him where later on in the season, Fran McCaffrey started using him off of some screen-to-screener actions, a little bit of stagger stuff like misdirection plays, which is really unique stuff to see for somebody his size. I do buy into the shooting a decent amount with Keegan. He was 30% as a freshman, 40% as a sophomore. He's probably closer to 35 to 37%. But I do think that he's going to provide a lot of value for a team in being a shot maker and somebody that has enough versatility to do it in whatever way the team sees need.
One more break here, guys, so I can tell you about BetOnline.net. Our partners, BetOnline, continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season NFL futures, all at BetOnline.net. They've got the basketball lines for every playoff game right on there. Game 2 tonight in Golden State. Golden State favored by 6.5 over Dallas. Should be interesting, and you can get that line at betonline.net, your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head on to that website today or use your mobile device to sign up and learn more about the trends in the action over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is where the game starts. Would once again like to thank everyone for making Locked On Pacers their first listen today and every single day. And I also recommend Locked On NBA Big Board to hear more about these prospects that I can only talk about every so often. I cannot just do a show about prospects and call it a Pacers show. But this is a Pacers show, and they're an NBA team. And I want to talk about Keegan Murray's NBA fit a little bit here. And he's an interesting one because with most prospects, spacing is helpful, in general, especially ones that can read the game pretty well on defense. They don't get hindered as much on that end as the benefit they get from having more on offense. That said, he does sort of have a more, I keep saying post up in my head when I'm like running through what I'm about to say, but it's not a post up. He just has his back to the basket. He goes through more of those situations than are common in the NBA. So how do you kind of view his NBA fit or how his game will transition from Iowa City to the NBA?
Yeah, I think the biggest change is going to be in where his spots are, right? In college, his spots were, like you said, that mid-post area, a lot of time at the elbows and isolations, the top of the key, and then coming off of exchanges on the weak side where he'd catch the ball on the wing and make a quick decision. A lot of that's going to change at the NBA level. Based on his size and his role, what he does well, I think the corners are going to be really valuable spots for him to start his career. I think pick and pops are a decent area for him. And then just being able to make decisions on the wings, right? Whether it's a backdoor cutter, maybe he turns that into a mismatch post up every now and again. Sometimes it's going to be secondary handling and attacking closeouts. But I view him as more of a catch and shoot type of usage with the ability to, in special situations, mismatch post if coach calls for a play in that area. Isolate at the elbows and make a play one-on-one late clock if that's what his team needs. Be more of a handoff screener type of guy on second sides of actions, which is really valuable. It's just not what you design your entire offense around. So in thinking about the context of how you structure a team, he's never going to be the most important piece, or to me, the second most important piece, but a really versatile cog that you can plug into that third or fourth spot and how you build out your playbook. That's really, really valuable. And again, I know I mentioned it earlier, but have to say this again. Transition is a place where he makes a huge impact. And that extra 4 to 8 points a game that he can create in that area is really, really important.
I don't want to comp these two players. Now I'm gonna bring my own NBA names into the mix. A role sort of like what Lauri Markkanen gave Cleveland this year makes a lot of sense for Keegan Murray. Maybe not quite that much like him at the 3, but toggling between a perimeter guy and a post guy, depending on the rest of the line. Not even a post guy. Whatever the NBA version of a post guy is now. Toggling between that, given who else is in the lineup, and Markkanen took a step forward on defense this year. Like kind of being able to be a spacer, a connector, and a shooter all in one makes a lot of sense to me. And that's how the Cavs were able to make Markkanen way more impactful than he was with the Bulls, where he was just like a shooter and they tried to force him to create for himself every so often. He was way better with Cleveland. So maybe that's not the perfect example, but that's kind of the role when I look at Keegan Murray that I'm like, okay, that's how I can see him, at least on offense, kind of being an impactful NBA player.
Yeah. I try not to do the comparison stuff a ton. Again, I break my own cardinal rules pretty much every day. So happy to indulge.
I don't like comps that much either, but from a role perspective, that one felt pretty good to me.
Yeah, I think role wise for me, it's like a matchup of Danny Granger and Pascal Siakam, where the transition stuff with Siakam, the multiple spin moves, just the ability to be more of a front court guy who can handle and if he gets the ball with 20 feet away from the basket, takes one or two dribbles to get a running start at the hoop, he's going to make something positive happen and get to the rim. Then there's this Danny Granger-ish like shooting ability while also not being a huge movement guy or a huge like create your own shot type of guy. Like a lot of it is spot up impact, and he can do it on high volume and has enough in his bag to create his own, but optimally he's more of a floor spacer. So it's like some combination of those guys somewhere. But again, in this class and with the high floor that he brings of just being able to be a productive guy at the minimum, I think that he's definitely worth considering no lower than 10th or 11th right now.
Yeah, because he can kind of do some of everything, I think he'll fit well in the NBA. Like, I think the word in Indie Cornrows, Caitlin and Mark and Ben Pfeiffer did a post on him, and Caitlin's word was completeness. That was it. That is a really good way of putting it. Like he doesn't have a ton of really major holes, and that's going to allow him to be really useful in the NBA. And those guys who are really versatile are, look at the playoffs right now. Like they're on every team and they're playing a lot. Now there is one problem with his Pacers fit, and that is that Iowa State is where Tyrese Halliburton went to school. So we got some rivalries going on the floor. That said, and an actual serious perspective, Tyrese in transition is like a genius. Like that is where he is his absolute best. Flying up the floor, seeing the lane, seeing who's open. Him and Murray could be really deadly in that exact setting. So from a Pacers perspective specifically, don't know how I forgot how to say that word specifically, I think those two would fit really well in transition, even though it's not like all your possessions. That would be good. And then having a guy like Halliburton who is in charge of having the ball more because Keegan is more of an off-ball, get open kind of guy, I think that would be a really strong fit, especially with other shooters and lob threats like the Pacers have. Like I think his fit with the Pacers on the offensive side specifically is pretty damn good given what he's good at.
Yeah, certainly agree with all of that analysis. And I actually think it's not bad defensively because, as I mentioned earlier, would love to see Keegan actually play with a rim protector to give him that little bit of blanket coverage behind him. And Miles Turner can certainly provide that while also providing enough three-point shooting as that stretch five type of option where maybe you can utilize a little bit more of Murray's interior scoring ability, his mismatch post-ups as a frequent weapon. So I actually really like the fit here in Indiana. The challenge is going to be making sure that you're at a draftable position to be able to get him. I don't think Murray, is a top 4 guy in this class. So jumping up in the
to cut you off for a second. Listeners, we are talking before the lottery. So there's a chance what we're saying right now does not make sense. But carry on.
You're right. You're right. My apologies there. It's all about draftable range for him, right? Not a top 4 guy. I think there's a pretty clearly delineated top 4 in this draft and might be a hot commodity in that 5 through 7 range. So it all depends on how the ping pong balls shake out for who's going to end up right in that sweet spot for Keegan Murray. But in terms of his fit in Indiana, 100% love it.
The position they need to, they have not had, because TJ Warren was hurt, they really have had like no one really solid as a forward in a long time, especially on the offensive end. So that fit makes a lot of sense. And I like that what you said about the defense. Like, even if it's not Turner, and it might be Turner this coming season, I think they would like to have him back. But even Isaiah Jackson looks like he's going to be a good rim protector, like a weak side helper kind of guy that can really allow him to be better in the pick and roll, in whatever he is tasked with doing on defense. So I do like Keegan Murray's fit with the Pacers quite a bit. I just have trouble with a guy whose on-court play is good, but isn't like this awesome force that his advanced stats scream, hey, this guy's going to be insane when you turn on Iowa basketball. But I still rate him pretty highly as a prospect in this draft.
Yeah, definitely not the sexiest guy out there in this draft in terms of his star appeal, the insane level of shot making that he brings. Like, doesn't check a lot of those boxes athletically in terms of how he jumps off the page, but a very, very solid player. And to steal the line from our good friend Caitlin Cooper, is very complete.
Very complete indeed. And he killed IU in the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis. So I'm sure lots of Pacers fans think very highly of his game. Adam, thank you very much for the time. Where can people follow you and all your work covering this draft? I don't know if you've put out anything outside of the Box and One yet, but I want to make sure everybody knows where you can find all that. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Always glad to come on and talk Pacers here. Find me pretty much on Twitter, either at Spinella14 or at @theboxand1_. That is our main NBA draft page. Putting out a ton of content on YouTube, and that's just my name, Adam Spinella there. Look for about 4 to 5 prospect video breakdowns a week, some mock drafts, big board work out there. And as we get closer to the draft, some specific team fits as well. So I know the Pacers will be having some stuff coming out on our channel in the near distant future.
There we go. Yeah, Boxing One jumping all over G League Ignite Camp, which started a couple hours ago as we speak. And draft combine stuff starts for us tomorrow for you listening a few days ago. So this draft stuff between the lottery and all that is going to get really fast and really crazy. And I hope you can all follow Adam to get more information on that. This show is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers and me at TEastNBA for more random musings about the Pacers, their offseason, and this draft. We'll be back soon talking more prospects, more fallout from the lottery, wherever the Pacers landed. I don't know at this time, but you listening do. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you soon.